Happy Monday afternoon, Dr. Stone.
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Lamb.
And hello to
So what's
everybody
shaking?
who's joining us. You asked me a question and I spoke over it, so I didn't hear it.
I just asked what's shaking.
Um,
How's been your week?
the leaves on the trees. It's a little windy today.
There you go.
It was really this was our first not so nice weekend in a while. I don't know about how it was for you, but we had um, um, we had a little bit of mist and a little bit of spitting on Saturday. I was up in Bellingham and it was kind of cold.
Well, that's a relief for all living things after the heat, I think.
Yeah, except a friend of ours, Monique Class, was at a wedding up there, and she was telling me she was at a wedding on Lopez Island, and it was a cold wedding. So,
Oh, well,
anyway,
there you go.
so it's I was up in Bellingham visiting my son over the weekend, and mask policies are changing, aren't they?
They certainly are. And some people are confused, but those of us in medicine understand that this is really a what's sweeping the country now is really a new COVID virus.
Yeah.
So we get to go back to the public health things we know that work, and
Right.
and that really is masking. And so,
Yeah. Well, for
it's
me,
causing a lot of confusion and a lot of pushback.
right. And I think we're forgetting about a very vulnerable population when or the people who are pushing back against wearing their masks are forgetting about a very vulnerable population, which is children between the age of being born and 12 who have not yet been vaccinated.
And that's very true. And and the average age of the admitted person, or even the patients that are being intubated, is dropping rapidly.
Yeah.
So it's not like it was even. It's not like it was a year ago.
No.
So what did you see going on in Bellingham?
Well, a fair number of shops now are having signs up that say, despite the current policy, we really appreciate you wearing a mask, even if you're vaccinated.
Well, that's a pleasant way to say it. We're getting some pushback from the employees in higher volume businesses that they want to know and believe that their employers are thinking about their health. And so, we're seeing it in restaurants where people working, wait staff, are deciding not to continue to work if they don't have an aggressive masking policy.
Yeah.
So we're heading into a period of division.
Well, I think you're right. And for me, like you and I were talking about, I think the kind of tension that we've been under makes us a little blind to how much we're actually alike with all the other people around us. And, our colleague, Courtney Suter, when we were at Feathered Pipe, talked about, that tendency to get angry with people on the road, right? When we're driving, when we're out and about, and the quick response for anger, and how trying to think about why someone's driving the way they are is a really necessary piece to do. And yet, in this kind of tense, frenetic world that we're living in, when someone does something to you in traffic, it's easy to go to that dark place.
Well, you did see that. It's easy to react almost easily anybody when people are frustrated and don't feel like they have much control in their decisions or in their life process.
Right.
So what do we do about that?
Well, I think the first step is just being cognizant of how we're feeling and how we're doing. I was telling you before we got on the call that I was driving this morning on I-5 and got passed by a motorcyclist who didn't use a lane to pass me, but used the space between me and the car and the lane next to me to pass me. And I was doing 78 miles an hour in the left-hand lane. So I certainly wasn't dawdling. And my immediate gut reaction, which fortunately I thought about, was I could kind of play Super Mario Brothers with him and use him like a Pong, which, because I was scared. But thinking back to what Courtney said, I started thinking about, well, why is he going so fast? Is he on the way to a loved one who's hurt or sick? Or, what's going on with him that or could have been a she, but I think it was a he, that they're going that fast, and trying to come to that recognition.
What did that help you understand about yourself, other than you couldn't believe somebody was passing you at 78 miles an hour going in between two cars at a dangerously narrow space?
Well, I think there's a little bit of the recognition that we all have a shadow, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that shadow is emotion, is that shadow energetics that we transmit, is that shadow the reaction that how we're perceived by others, right?
Yeah. I think you had a Carl Jung quote, right, about that piece in others that irritates us.
Yeah, and it's one that you shared earlier. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, and that's something that's been put on the back burner, I think, quite a bit in this last 18 to 20 months.
Yeah. Well, I think, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, speaks to security and resources being first and foremost. It speaks to, having enough food, having enough shelter, having safety. And, and we really don't think about those being issues for most of us, being safe. But, everything we've seen in this last year really is about safety. The COVID epidemic's about safety. Black Lives Matter is about safety. People asking to be in a place where they're treated with respect and that they're not in danger of losing their lives just because of their skin.
Right, and they're not, and they feel like their children are vulnerable. And
Right.
you see that with the marked increase in food deserts and inadequate food, and you're seeing that even in the last weekend as the eviction moratorium hasn't been dealt with, and you're seeing it with the rapid progression of violence at the barrel of a gun in so many cities. So, Joe, you mentioned the security resources, right? You mentioned food, you mentioned shelter, you mentioned safety, and it's visible or invisible, right? The
Yeah.
invisible aspect is COVID, and the invisible aspect is what is coming from somebody else who's not wearing a mask. So, we're just ripe to trigger all sorts of reactions, and there are a lot of different shadows we are walking through.
That's true. And that you know, Carl Jung, really talked about each of us having a shadow, each of us having pieces, parts that we split off. For men, our shadows are anima, and for women, the shadow is the animus. And there's partly it's a gender or sex or orientation separation for us, but it's also, it's the part of us that we don't want to look at. The peaceful person who doesn't want to be a warrior, the you know the thoughtful person who doesn't want to be insensitive, um, the victim who doesn't want to recognize that they could be a predator themselves. It's and a lot of it is undiscovered, and a lot of it remains shadow because of judgment, which we have to get past.
Yeah. So I think that may, even posing those questions. So some of the tools that we use clinically or personally is the power of journaling, the power of reflective answering, and what we incorporated in at Harmony Hill and also at Feathered Pipe was the power of drawing or writing your own story of the past,
Right.
and also drawing your current problem. So I think sometimes those techniques, as you've so wonderfully pointed out, help us to focus and contemplate and consider the shadows that we respond to and the shadows that we cast.
Absolutely. And I think I like that part about the shadows that we cast, because those things that we can't see create shadows past which we can't look. And they also block other people from seeing. It ends up being like the cartoon of the person who's looking for their car keys under the streetlight, and the other person walks up and goes, "Did you lose your car keys here?" And the person goes, "No, I lost them over there." And the person's like, "Well, why aren't you looking over there?" And they're like, "Because the light is here."
Yeah.
And I think we're not looking. You're right. We're not looking at the right things, and we're not paying attention to perhaps why people are doing the stuff that they're doing. But we're also not paying attention to why we're doing it, which I think is important. And you mentioned the whole, draw out your story, draw out your present, draw out your past, draw out yourself with the biggest problem. And, the part of the reason for drawing is it's sometimes a little easier for people to disconnect and from what they have to put on the page, and they get some surprises about the pictures that they drew.
Yeah. it's very true. It's sometimes some surprising things if you've ever spent time journaling about things of the past. It's surprising the perceptions that come out at the end of your pen. Um,
Yeah.
and I think then the next step is to ask yourself: Are these are past? These are penned revelations of a perception of the past. Is that true presently, affecting me presently? And I think that that is it's a powerful tool if we allow, if we turn off the digital, if we turn off news and media and everything, and if we allow ourselves just to reflect on our humanness, you know.
I get that. I get that. It's I think that the meditative part of quieting becomes a big part of it, right? If we can't find quiet and peace, then we're going to have a big part of how do we get there, right?
Yeah,
How do we even know that we're at a place where we don't want to be?
yeah.
And that's why, you know, um, a meditative practice, a soft belly breathing practice, those sorts of things make a difference.
No, it's really true. Um, I'm not sure whether it's my uh, astrological sign, which is Pisces, or the fact that I spent so much time in my youth swimming, but when I find that if I can get in and swim, it is kind of this active meditative thing. For other people, it's running. For other people, it's an active meditation is golfing. I mean, it's a lot of different things. Other people, it's foresting or spending time in nature. But it's so powerful to have that quieting time, and we know that it triggers neuroplastic changes, and your brain really does change. And even in a recent report, that was reviewed in Science Digest, it was a very large study of about 10,000 folks, and all they did is they added 40 minutes of walking 3 times a week. And not only did cognition improve, but there was increased neurosynaptic formation and actual brain connective growth. And so these things that we're talking about today, Joe, it can be quiet, it can be active. It is a way to disconnect a bit of our left hemisphere, the part of our brain that's always calculating, and let our other portions of our brain, our right hemisphere, be activated. And that's what you see in many of the studied aspects of meditation.
Absolutely. It's that difference between relaxation and appreciation, and that appreciation piece being gratitude. And um, one of the listeners brought up the idea that you've modeled both here talking about, but then you also modeled at Feathered Pipe about a gratitude journal first thing in the morning and using a phone as a gratitude journal.
Yeah. If we allow ourselves to quiet, uh, we recognize that we will see parts of the universe we've never seen before, and suddenly it's new. Suddenly it's not the same old thing, and suddenly you're a little less stuck, and and suddenly most times you can breathe a little deeper, and just allow your senses to engage a little more. And so, in this time of craziness and increased social stress and work stress and financial stress for so many people, and all the different challenges of the dynamic of what we're going through. we can draw on these things, these gifts that we've been given, and just use them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the heart math piece, right? That Doc Childre and Howard Martin talked about, the appreciation piece. And I think that, even if you don't get the heart math app, what you're doing when you do that gratitude piece, that thankfulness piece, that appreciation piece, you're driving coherence versus relaxation, and the kind of different um, um, boundary there.
No, it's true, and that's what some of the different devices that are starting to, the personal recording devices, whether it's an Oura ring or whether it's some of the other different devices that start picking up heart rate variability, and recognizing that when we get ourselves into that space where you've really downregulated your sympathetic fight or flight response to more of a parasympathetic response, that it's a healthier place to be.
Absolutely. That kind of ramped up sympathetic nervous system um, leads to a lack of heart rate variability, which is actually associated with more cardiovascular events and more fear. It almost it it's it for years we thought stability in heart rhythm was a good thing, and we thought maintaining a nice steady pulse was a good thing. But we've learned that almost a sinusoidal, a sine wave pattern, an S shape, speeding up of the heart rate in terms of a shortening of the interval between beats, and then the widening and shortening and a widening, going back and forth, actually represents flexibility. And it puts me in kind of in mind of, if we see that stability, which is actually associated with maintaining a state of alarm, a state of readiness as being good, that's like, that is a delusion, right? We're looking at it in the wrong way. And there's a great Einstein quote: a human being is part of a whole called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion becomes a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living things, creatures, and the whole of nature and its beauty. And, I think it's going to ask people each day to have to go out and take on doing something, different, for us to get to a different place. Because I don't think, as you said earlier, the Delta variant's like a whole new virus. I don't think it's going away. The social unrest is not going away. Of the political attention, of the recognition of the divisiveness that we experience. We've got huge economic things potentially facing us as the moratorium on evictions end, as bonuses for unemployment end. What will people's attitudes be about, how hard should I work for how much money? And, all of this is going to really just take acknowledging, maybe we just need to do something beyond appreciation and try to do some act each day that makes a difference. Actually do something in the world. That old, bumper sticker, which actually has a wisdom, practice a random act of kindness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes me want to go to Starbucks in the morning and pay for the person behind me instead of doing some other things.
No, I think it's and that is a challenge. Maybe the challenge not only is journaling and acknowledging that stuff, but it's also trying to recall what the random act of kindness was. Just one.
Or just going out and doing
day.
one.
Right.
I mean, almost everywhere we go these days, there's an opportunity to do something. Like I noticed it on the menu at McDonald's while I was traveling over the weekend. McDonald's has a little thing on their menu board that you can look at about rounding up. And they'll donate the proceeds to the Ronald McDonald House. We just have to remember to say it. That's a random act of kindness. It may not be witnessed, but the whole heart math stuff demonstrated if enough people practice coherence at the same time, it actually changed outcomes.
No, that's exactly true. And we've seen that, haven't we seen that in those interesting people focusing on ICU rooms and just thinking or praying, if you wish, for the person in an ICU room, even 1,000 miles away, even if they didn't know their name, they just focused their attention on a single room. So maybe thinking of the Ronald McDonald, rounding up the Ronald McDonald House, maybe when we round up, then we just hold an attention to help the children in the Ronald McDonald House heal. And we know that it affects immunity, that interesting focused attention changes immune function in the people in those ICU studies. So you're right. It seems like a simple thing to round up. But then when you take the next step and we're rounding it up to help Ronald McDonald House, who's in the Ronald McDonald House, the family members that are helping care or are being displaced for their child who's undergoing treatment for some intense medical disease or condition. And suddenly our humanness extends to even people we don't know.
Right. And we have lots of opportunities. It doesn't have to be monetary. Engaging people in conversation, giving a smile, acknowledging what someone does for you, saying thank you. A lot of people go through their day doing a lot of stuff, never hearing a thank you.
Yeah, simple things.
So I am going to try to do one each day this next week. Go out of my way to remember to do something each day more than I already do. Think we can make that a challenge to everybody?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Idea.
Maybe next week, we've had a lot of people listen today. Maybe next week we can all share an example in the chat of what we've done.
I think that's great. So what is are there any different plans or thoughts of what's happening next for the Consilience Partnership?
I am working on some dates. I'm trying to find some places for us to teach in the fall. We certainly are going to find some places to teach in the spring. One of the attendees at Feathered Pipe says that she's already recruited 4 girlfriends. She wants to come back and she wants to bring 4 girlfriends next year. So I want to try to make the commitment to be back for all of everybody's friends who they want to bring. So we're working on it.
Oh, great.
We're
That's a
working on it.
Good intention set right there.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, let's go from there.
All right.
Have a
Thanks,
good
everybody.
day. Have a good week. Smile at somebody.
Yeah.
Or maybe that wasn't a smile. Yeah, it's more of a,
It generated one, though.
Yeah.
Generated one.
It got us laughing.
All right.
All right. And thank you,
Very good.
everybody, for listening today. Bye-bye.
Bye.